What has happened, everybody? James Hancock here. Tonight it is my honor and my privilege to review the season finale of The Penguin, an episode that I found to be vastly superior to most of the big-budget superhero movies being made today. But not to worry, this is not the last time we'll see Colin Farrell in the role of Oz, aka the Penguin, because he recently confirmed he'll be back in 2026 in the sequel to The Batman. But for this video, I'm going to go spoiler-free at first, but there are two really big, like revelations or twists or spoilers toward the end of the episode that I refuse not to discuss, but I'll save that for later and give you a verbal warning as well as a time code down below before I unveil anything, because I think a lot of people have been sitting on the sidelines and not watching this show. It hasn't really been generating great numbers, but I think after the word of mouth starts to spread about this episode, people will be like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have been so skeptical or dubious or just so suspicious, because I was kind of suspicious of this show at first. The superhero genre has been in such rough shape in recent years with so many hacks and second-rate storytellers just making one abysmal failure after another. I almost I refused to believe that this show could turn out to be as satisfying as it turned out to be. And I think it got even better toward the end. Like episode 7 and episode 8, I think those are the two best episodes of the entire season. And I think another reason I was kind of reluctant to get into the show early on is that people kept comparing it to The Sopranos, and I think The Sopranos is the best show of the last 25 years. And admittedly, I'm not some giant TV junkie, but of the TV that I've seen, The Sopranos is tough to compete with. And in honor of the occasion, I decided to whip out my Bada Bing t-shirt, which I'm amazed it even still fits. I haven't worn it in years, and I've gotten a little fatter in the interim. But as long as people are making comparisons between Oz and Tony Soprano, which once again, I don't think it's a fair contrast, because The Sopranos is its own beast and The Penguin is its own beast. And The Sopranos was going for a much more grounded, just kind of family-oriented portrayal of an organized crime family. And we lived with those characters for so many years. But The Penguin, holy shit, it is the best version of itself that it could be, given what it was trying to achieve. And that's enough, because like I said, we're living in a desert of really terrible superhero movies these days, and out of nowhere, The Penguin came along and just blew my goddamn mind. But if this show indirectly encourages some of the youngins out there to go back and watch The Sopranos, I'll chalk that up as a win. But let's stay focused on The Penguin, because I feel like all the writers, all the directors, all the actors, everybody involved with the show deserves to spike the football, do a little victory dance. This episode in particular was written by showrunner Lauren LaFranc and directed by Jennifer Getzinger. And all I'll say is, sign those two ladies up for some movies, because I keep coming back to the idea that, whether you're talking about Sony movies or Marvel movies or DC movies, so many of them these days are just wretched, just awful, just embarrassing to watch. But I feel like, Lauren LaFranc and Jennifer Getzinger, they've reminded us that superhero movies and superhero shows can be really cool if you make them with a lot of heart and a lot of integrity. But I think the real secret sauce to this show, obviously, there's a great ensemble cast, great setting, great story, but it all boils down to Oz and Sophia, who are just world-class, just Hall of Fame villains. I absolutely fell in love with both of them. And if you follow this channel for any stretch of time, you'll know that I absolutely despise this modern trend in Hollywood where villains are not allowed to be villains, where they never really do anything bad, and sometimes they just get turned into heroes outright. I'm like, no, those are villains. They've been villains for 60, 70, 80 years in some cases. Let the villains be villains. Fuck all that soft and fuzzy bullshit. I like to see my villains torturing people or setting them on fire, or villains who backstab one another with one double cross after another, or who murder their siblings as children, or just make vast sums of money off their drug-fueled empires, or even ... I'll save the final example of what the villains in this show do for the very end of this video, because it was this earth-shattering moment where it went from being so heartwarming and so touching, where I was getting chills in my arms, and I was like, oh, how sweet, how nice. And I was like, oh my God. I could not believe that final twist. But it's almost like this show gave me what I want, but 10 times more, because like I said before, I like to see my villains be villains, but I probably would have given the show a pass if they had not done what they had Oz do toward the end. But it's all right, this is what I always say, what I want. Now they've given it to me, and now I got to wrestle with these conflicted emotions. And I think that scene, people are going to be discussing it for days, and that's what HBO shows are supposed to be about. Those water cooler moments where you go to work the next day and you're like, did you see this fucking show last night? Holy fucking shit, I could not believe what I just saw. And so few shows manage to generate that kind of excitement in the modern era. So this is all just a very long-winded way of saying that I like being wrong, especially when I'm wrong when a show like wildly exceeds my expectations. Because I've been watching this show every step of the way, and all along I've been thinking like should I start doing weekly breakdowns or should I just enjoy it for what it is? And I kept worrying in the back of my mind that the show would like pull like a bait and switch, which we've seen with some HBO shows. Like the way Westworld started is very different from how Westworld, like what it evolved into. I can't stand the bait and switch where they'll have like, some really hardcore kick-ass genre entertainment filled with violence and villains and nudity and, crazy stakes and just, great dramatic endings and cliffhangers. And then it just slowly morphs into something else where they're like, aha, like we got you. Like we lured you in with like this bait. But what we really wanted to do is tell this other story. And I really resent that. And so it makes me like very cautious. And I always kind of have like my guard up. I'm like, all right, bring it on, motherfuckers. Like how are you going to betray me this time? But this show didn't betray me at all. It just kept getting better. And when I saw last week's episode, like especially the way that it opened, I was like, Jesus fucking Christ. Like this is really hardcore stuff, especially in the very neutered, very defanged, declawed superhero genre, which I'm just going to keep coming back to it. It's just been sucking ass over the last couple of years, and The Penguin is one of those rare exceptions that reminds us that superhero shows or supervillain shows can be extremely fucking cool. So now that I've gotten that initial burst out of my system, let's slow down and call attention to some of the cast, because the cast was incredible. If not for the cast of this show, then it would have been nothing. And John Turturro's got to be kicking himself. I read somewhere or saw some quote where John Turturro, he was offered to come back and play the same role from the Batman. He was like, oh, I didn't want to do it because the show just has too much violence towards women. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, sometimes actors should just say nothing and just let their agents or their lawyers or their management do the talking for them, because they just come across like such dumbasses. But to be fair, Mark Strong, who got to replace him, I think Mark Strong did a better job with the character. But let's talk a little bit about Kristen Milioti, if I'm saying her name correctly, who plays Sophia. Holy shit. She's incredible. Just such a fantastic villain. I suspect that after every single episode, there are a lot of our fans that just went online and went on a shopping spree. She's got the best wardrobe of any villain in recent memory. Like in this episode, that black dress she was wearing with the scarf that went underneath, like, it was making steam rise off my head. But she's so lethal and, damaged in some ways, but also so tough and so resourceful, so ambitious. And I guess I got to start easing into spoiler light terrain, but I found it very fitting that she ended up right back with all the crazies at the end of the season. It's like, oh my gosh, you only got to enjoy like a few months of freedom after like 10 years of hell. But if they ever circle back to the characters, and they absolutely should, like if they don't include her in the second Batman movie, that would be a huge mistake on their part. She's incredible. But I would love to see her have at least like a few more minutes, or maybe an entire episode just in Arkham, kind of, wreaking havoc and taking over the place again. Although it'd be tough to top that episode where we saw all of her time in Arkham, because I think that was also one of the best episodes of the season. And it just blows my mind how well written the character was, where she's merciless and she's cruel and does terrible things, but at the same time, she's incredibly sympathetic. But they don't veer over into her becoming an anti-hero or a figure of sympathy or a figure of pity or anything like that. She's strong and she murders a hell of a lot of people, including, like the parents of little girls. I mean, she does some evil, diabolical shit. Or that scene in this episode, and once again, like, I guess at this point all bets are off. I've got to discuss some spoilers, or I can't really give credit where credit is due. But the idea of her getting revenge on Oz by putting him in a situation where she's going to force him to admit that he murdered his brothers, and she's just going to tear his heart out. And of course the mother is just like I've known all along, like fuck you. And it's great seeing her get that off her chest. And speaking of the mother, which actress played the mother? I'm blanking. Hang on one sec. It is, oh shit, she's got a name that I'm going to get wrong, but Deirdre O'Connell. I know I'm getting that wrong, but anyway, she was a powerhouse this season, absolutely fantastic. And the dementia she's suffering from made her so unpredictable, and I feel like she justifiably was a figure of pity. And I just love seeing how Oz had these like really intense mommy issues that he's clearly by the end of the episode still wrestling with. So much when we see his girlfriend at the very end dressed up as his mother with the hair and the dress, I was like, oh, is Oz starting to get dementia like his mother? Is he gonna follow in her footsteps? But no, he really just needs somebody to role play his mother and say that she's proud of him. But oh my God, what a dysfunctional relationship. I mean, as great as Oz and Sophia were as antagonists, and as great as Oz and Vic were as like the mentor and the young Padawan that he's bringing up through the ranks, obviously Oz and his mother Fran, that was an incredible relationship. And I do need to pause to give a shout out to, hang on, the character Rex Calabrese or Calabrese. I don't know how they pronounce the last name, but actor Louis Cancelmi. I mean, I'm fucking everybody's name up, but anyway, he was recently in Killers of the Flower Moon. But I feel like of all the actors portraying kind of old school classic gangsters this season of TV, he was the only one where I was like, you know what? He could have been in Goodfellas. He could have been in Carlito's Way. He could have been in one of those. I mean, he's obviously way too young to have been in one of those movies, but he's got the look and the authenticity and just that he exudes that aura. But what was incredible is how we learn in this this big scene between Fran and Sophia and Oz that she was going to have Rex kill her little boy after that big evening out of the town. She's like, all right, let's get dressed up. Let's go out. And Oz is like, I'm going to take care of you, Ma. And I'm going to make it all white, blah, blah, blah. And just giving her this long spiel. And all the while she was thinking about having Rex just take out the trash and kill this damaged little murderer. And I love that scene where Rex was saying, you can actually channel all these impulses into something more productive where you can put them to good use, and I can train them to be a loyal soldier and that sort of thing. It was brilliant stuff. Like that level of writing and acting and authenticity was worthy of a comparison to a show like The Sopranos. But once again, the superhero genre and the world of like organized crime, when it comes to like a gritty portrayal of New York, I just feel like those two worlds, they're very different. We're still in the world where Batman is jumping off rooftops and scaring people and so on and so forth. And once again, final spoiler warning, I'm not going to give any more spoiler warnings. They finally acknowledged that the Batman does exist in this world. I know obviously we got a brief reference to him in the very first episode when they're talking about the flooding of the city and that sort of thing. But the whole time I was thinking, or this whole season, I was like, is Batman like, is he calling in sick, or is he on vacation with like, a bunch of ballerinas? Like, where is Bruce Wayne? Where's the Batman? But that was such a great little final touch after this brilliant episode that was so satisfying and so horrifying toward the end. To have the bat signal going at the very end, I was like, chef's kiss, perfect ending. Everybody take a bow, or take several bows, and I was able to go home with a smile on my face. But finally, we come to actor Renzi Feliz, who played Vic Aguilar, and oh my God, like what an incredible evolution. His character from where we first find him or first meet him early on in the season to what he evolved into, where he's so confident and so competent and so capable and so reliable, where you could really see him being Oz's right-hand man for decades. I mean, he just like... Gotham is just there for the taking. The sky's the limit. Like, he's got limitless potential, and he's got so much love and affection for Oz. And when he said, what was his exact line? When he told Oz, "Oh, you're like family to me," I almost started like weeping. I mean, I had chills all down my arm. I was like, oh, like how sweet, how nice. I mean, I was completely like suckered and taken in by that moment. I was like, wow, like father-son relationship. Like they're gonna take over Gotham from here on out. And then Oz is like, yeah, like I can't have this kind of weakness in my life. And he starts choking him. I was like, yes, this is precisely what I always claimed that I want to see. And that's what you get. If you claim you want to see villains doing horrible stuff, eventually a filmmaker or a writer is going to call your bluff and give you exactly that. So thank you to everybody involved with this show for taking me to the edge of the cliff and showing me just how dark this show can really be. And it reminded me of a line that David Chase said when he was making The Sopranos. And for people who don't know, David Chase was the creator of The Sopranos. But he said throughout every single season, he had to constantly remind himself and his staff of writers, we can't let people fall in love with Tony to like too much. Like you can't be like, oh, here comes Tony. Everybody loves Tony. Like, isn't he just like a big lovable gangster? Blah blah blah. Every once in a while, he had to do something horrible to remind people, like, oh, like he's a deeply antisocial person who makes his money off of pain and misery and violent crime and that sort of thing. And I think that's why the show remained brilliant right up to the very controversial final scene. And you can interpret it however you like. But I feel like that's what kept like the moral compass of the show like pointed in the right direction, where he was cool and he was charismatic and we could admire him and look up to him and like be fascinated by him. But we were constantly reminded this is a deeply disturbed individual that we're rooting for who does horrible things. And I feel like that was part of the brilliance of this show, is that they gave us one final reminder. Oz is a goddamn thug, and he's a thug who murdered his fucking brother so that he could, like that little bird that Sophia's talking about, get more of the food in the nest, more of the love, more of the affection. And as she told him, I had plenty of love to give to all three of you, but Oz wanted it all. He's got his mommy issues. And it's just incredible when you see the structure of an entire season building up to a moment and then delivering in such satisfying fashion. Just fantastic stuff. So Vic, I'm sorry we won't see you in the second Batman movie, but people will remember Renzi Feliz, and I feel like for the next 5, 10, 15 years, no matter what shows he's doing, whenever movies he might be doing, people are going to say, like, dude, I fucking loved you in The Penguin. He's going to be very proud of this work for the rest of his career. And one final piece of praise, I just loved how the show allowed Oz to do badass shit and do cool things. Like, there's so many shows like Obi-Wan Kenobi where, like, Obi-Wan becomes like the 4th or 5th most important character in his own goddamn show, where he just comes across like a total dumbass who can never do anything properly. And it's like, this is the Obi-Wan Kenobi show. Like, let Obi-Wan be a bad motherfucker. Oz got to be a bad motherfucker. Even in the middle of being tortured and having his mother shove a broken bottle into his stomach, well, he manages to break the chair and, use the guy as a shield and take his gun and kill. I mean, he just goes on a murderous rampage. It was so satisfying. Or the big double cross that Vic helps to organize out at the airport, where it's just like boom, 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 with lethal, ruthless efficiency. We see all the kind of underlings taking out the trash. And it was a great little montage. I'm not going to say that it was a montage on the level of, like, all the heads of the 5 family getting taken out in The Godfather. But it was cool seeing all the kind of like number 2, number 3s, like kind of people down the ranks taking out their bosses. I guess the final irony is that now that they're in charge, well, then obviously they got a big bullseye on their forehead because they're going to have underlings that want to come up the ranks as well. But it was interesting seeing Oz kind of like positioning himself as, like, quote unquote, a man of the people. It's like, well, you're a man of the people who lives in a penthouse and drives a giant purple luxury vehicle and, has a top hat and a cane. That was so cool seeing him, like, go full blown Penguin, like going back, I think it was like 1940 or 41. I can't remember the exact year where the Penguin character was introduced, but he's been around for a long fucking time. But the top hat and the cane and the color purple have always been a part of his whole shtick. And obviously, you got to whip with the monocle eventually, but maybe they'll save that for Batman 2. But just to wrap up this point, it was a genuine relief to see that the writers and the directors on the show remembered that this is a show called The Penguin. They let the Penguin be the star of his own show. And these are things that are so obvious and so clear to people who like certain characters or like certain franchises. But we see over and over and over again so many shows and so many movies getting it wrong, where they'll use a certain franchise or a character to kind of backdoor a different story that they would rather tell. And it's like, go fuck yourself. And so it was just... I guess it was just a relief to see that all my paranoia and all my fears that I experienced early on in the season, where, like, I refused to let the show into my heart because I was worried it would betray me by the end, like, all those fears and all that paranoia were totally absurd on my part. And the show managed to deliver wildly above and beyond my highest expectations. So I'll try to have an open mind about Dune Prophecy next week when it makes its season premiere. I've got modest to low expectations, but I mean, it's based on a book that Frank Herbert didn't even write. It's I feel like stop making prequels, like make sequels. And obviously, Denis Villeneuve is working on a sequel to Dune right now, or his third Dune movie. I don't know if I need to see Dune Prophecy, but at least I'll give it a shot because I enjoy watching HBO shows on Sunday evening. And I'll try to be a little less paranoid and unclench my sphincter as I watch more HBO shows in the future. But coming up in 2025, I saw the trailer before this episode, how they've got, more White Lotus coming next year. Very fired up for White Lotus. We've got The Last of Us. What else? There are a ton of trailers, but The White Lotus is probably the HBO show that I'm looking forward to the most in the immediate future. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. I imagine that a lot of people are going to want to hit me over the head and say, you total dumbass. It's been self-evident every step of the way that this show was going to turn out to be really, really good, but it took me a long time to come around. But I'm glad that I finally managed to kind of come over to the dark side and embrace this story of murder and mayhem and gangsters, and just to see it for the great show that it truly is. And I don't know if there'll be any more seasons, but at a minimum, 2026, Matt Reeves will be back with the Batman, and I hope he'll deliver something really special. But thank you for watching this video. Look forward to hearing people's thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, hitting that notification bell. Hope everybody has a great week, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.